Is it still permissible to use a wet towel and dripping water to induce the misperception of suffocation?
The use of the wet towel, dripping water to induce misperception suffocation was one of the techniques requested by the JTF in their laundry list given up. It was never approved. It has never been a technique approved.
One of the techniques that made the transition from the regime of the physical to the psychological, in fact, the only one really, was waterboarding. Because in the medieval era, under the Inquisition, it was done because of its horrible physical aspects. It was done to purge and punish the heretic. You force water down the throat of the victim. The victim thinks that he's drowning. It's horrible. Your body tells you that you're dying. Right after 9/11, the CIA got approval from the White House for waterboarding.
An early test case involved the interrogation of Ibn Sheikh al-Libi, a man suspected of being the emir of an al-Qaeda training camp. Initially, the FBI was in charge of his interrogation, but the administration was impatient with the slow results of the FBI's law enforcement techniques, so they turned al-Libi over to the CIA.
He is secured. He was either duct taped or hooded, and he was going to be put into a box, a plywood box, for his own protection, for transfer to the airport.
They threw him on an aircraft and they rendered him, through extraordinary rendition, to Egypt. They later subjected him to 2 weeks of brutal torture involving all these techniques, including waterboarding. And they got information from al-Libi stating that Saddam Hussein's regime had trained al-Qaeda in chemical and biological warfare.
One of the things we know about torture is that someone who is tortured will tell his interrogator what he thinks the interrogator wants to hear.
The moment al-Libi was waterboarded, he started blurting things out. Well, rather than questioning what he was saying and going into it in detail to see if what he was saying could be corroborated, they immediately stopped and ran off to report what al-Libi had said and ended the torture. And bang, it gets up to the highest decision makers, and all of a sudden Colin Powell is told, hey, you don't have to worry about your doubts anymore, because we've just gotten confirmation that there were contacts between al-Qaeda and Baghdad.
In February 2003, then Secretary of State Colin Powell went before the United Nations to make the case for the war in Iraq.
I can trace the story of a senior terrorist operative telling how Iraq provided training in these weapons to al-Qaeda. Fortunately, this operative is now detained, and he has told his story.
A year later, the CIA branded al-Libi a fabricator, rescinded all the intelligence reports with that information in it. So in other words, you will get information, but you'll get false information.
I think Colin Powell has said that was the most embarrassing day of his entire life.
All the experts say that torturing people is not the best way to get information. Breaking down the barriers between you and them, gaining their confidence, is the best way to get it. It takes some experience, it takes some talent, it takes some patience. And then they might actually tell you something that is worthwhile. And then if you want to prosecute them and execute them, go ahead.